Hey everyone, welcome to Massachusetts Sports Central. This is our NFL Power Rankings after Week 10 of the season. Just to remind everyone what these rankings are, this list represents how likely we think that each team will win Super Bowl 52. It is not an ordered list of the best teams necessarily. It also isn't a random list based on who beat who last week, so basically this list should be less reactionary than many of these types of power rankings. The middle of the rankings are really all over the place, and there are some ridiculous things like bad teams that got their butts kicked last week moving up just because some other teams seem to be even worse. I honestly really want to rank about a dozen teams between 20 and 25. Anyway, on to the rankings. One thing that's nice and stable, number 32, the Cleveland Browns, staying at the bottom as always. They are now the only winless team, so they're pretty much locked into this spot unless that changes, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee that they'll move up. A new number 31, the New York Football Giants, one of our only one-win teams, moving down one spot because they lost to number 30, the San Francisco 49ers, our newest one-win team with a win over the Giants. That one was fairly convincing, so hard to not put them over them, being that they won head-to-head just this week. They're both terrible. They're both kind of locked into these last couple of spots unless things change dramatically. The 49ers have a little bit better outlook for the rest of the season. That's not saying much. 2 or 3 wins, maybe even 4 if they're super duper lucky. Giants probably don't even get that high. All right, number 29, moving down 3 slots, the Chicago Bears. Not a lot of wins. Didn't look that great. There's not too much to be excited about with this team. I thought they were probably going to beat the Packers. The Packers didn't have Rodgers. I actually picked them to win that game because they had a better running game and they had a better defense, and neither of those played well. So they lost to a team that should be going down the tubes. And pretty much, not that they had really any realistic playoff hopes, but now they're a couple games behind third place in their own division, so they really have no shot at the playoffs at this point. Number 28, Holden Path, the Indianapolis Colts. They have one of the worst records in the league. They're not a very good team, and they almost beat Pittsburgh. That says a lot more about Pittsburgh and their tendency to play down to opponents than anything about the Colts, but they at least hung tough with a good team. So when you're this far down in the list, that's about as good as you can hope for. Number 27, also staying put, the Cincinnati Bengals. Pretty much a similar story, just not to as quite a good a team. They weren't quite as close to winning as the Colts were, and the Titans are not nearly as good a team as the Steelers are, but they are one of the, they're in playoff position. They are leading their division. They are several games over 500, so the fact that the Bengals were able to hold tough was enough to keep them from having to move down at all. Number 26, the Tampa Bay Bucks, actually moving up 3 slots. This shows how bad the bottom of the league is, that the Bucks winning by 5 over the Jets is enough to move them up 3 slots. But, other than the Niners, who moved up, this is the first team that actually won, so that's why you kind of have to move them up. This team's going nowhere. They're out of the playoffs, all but mathematically. Lost season. A lot of people thought they were going to be decent. Maybe they'll bounce back next year. Maybe last year was all smoke and mirrors, but definitely a disappointment, and they are unlikely to move up, much farther than the lower 20s, even if they turn around and have a good last few games of the season. Number 25, free falling, the Dallas Texans. Yeah, the Houston Texans. FYI, I'm not nearly old enough to actually remember the Dallas Texans. I was just reading something about some historical stuff earlier, so that's why it was on my brain. All right, so the Houston Texans falling down 5 slots to number 25. They have looked terrible the last couple of weeks. Like I said, this was I had this as a top 10 team just a few weeks ago before Watson got hurt. It's pretty amazing how important a quarterback is, because clearly Watson is not as good of a player per se as like a J.J. Watt. But J.J. Watt did not sink their season. Deshaun Watson completely sunk their season when he got hurt. If they can't find a better solution than Tommy, I'm barely good enough to play in high school Savage for the rest of the season, they could fall. They could fall a couple more places in this before the end. Yeah, there's just nothing to like about this team right now. As I mentioned before, the thing that's really has to hurt for Texans fans is, obviously lost season, injured players, going to be near the bottom of the league, but they don't even have their first or second round draft picks, so they don't even get the benefit of these could end up being top 5 picks the way they're going right now. Probably not quite that good just because they had a few wins before all this disaster happened, but certainly a top 10 pick. If they don't have a top 10 pick, it would be amazing at this point. And they don't get the benefit of either of the first or second rounders. All right, number 24, only moving down one slot, even though they are a terrible 3-6, have been on a bad losing streak and got their asses completely kicked by the Patriots, the Denver Broncos, because so many teams behind them are just so goddamn terrible that I can't actually rank them any lower than this, even though I think they should probably be like 27, 28, 29. No surprise that the offense is struggling. Pretty pathetic exactly how bad the defense is the last couple of weeks. I mean, like, really bad, like giving up like almost 100 points in the past 2 weeks. That's horrible. Now, obviously, some of that has to do with the offense being bad, because it's an ultimate team sport, a lot of yin and yang there. If the offense is playing really bad, it puts a lot of pressure on the defense, but not that much pressure. Also, the special teams really let them down in that Pats game too. I mean, my God, muffed punt, blocked punt, getting caught with too many men on the field on a 4th and 5 to give the Pats a first down on a punt. 103-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. I mean, my God, you cannot play special teams any worse than they did in that game. Interesting thing is, I don't really keep up on all of the positional coaches and minor coaches throughout the league, but apparently their special teams coach is also Brock O. So thank God for Osweiler, he wasn't the worst Brock O on Denver this week. Probably one of the few things he can take away from his last couple of years in the NFL as a positive. Okay. Enough about that. Number 23, also moving down one slot, the Los Angeles Chargers. Pretty much keeping a lost step with the Broncos as long as they have the same record. But they definitely lost their game in a completely different way. They had a chance to win their game, and they completely fell apart at the end. They got 2 late interceptions with a 3-point lead. They couldn't put it away. They let the Jags tie the game and then win it in overtime. Kind of pathetic. They should have won that game, and they just blew another one. This team just is good at finding ways to lose. And again, this is we're still in the territory where your season is pretty much over. Number 22, moving up 3 slots despite a loss, the Arizona Cardinals. This is one of those things where I said, a bad team, because I think they're a terrible team right now. That lost, moving up just because so many of the teams that are right behind them were so bad this week that they looked decent in comparison. David Johnson apparently took off his cast this week, so if he comes back at some point, that'll be a boost for this team. Personally, I would just shut him down unless somehow they win a couple of games in a row so they're on the fringe of the playoff contention when he's ready to come back. That seems very unlikely. So I would not risk re-aggravating the injury in a lost season, but, that's obviously up to the management there and, like I said, the circumstances. All right, moving down 2 slots, number 21, the New York Jets. They lost to the Bucs. That's enough to move you down because the Bucs are friggin' awful. Um, Jets are still overachieving for the most part this season, but they have not. They did not look good in that game. Not much else to say there. All right. Also, moving up one slot, ridiculously, the Miami Dolphins at number 20. Again, this team got their asses kicked, and I'm moving them up. Again, it's just hard. It's just so many of the other teams were so bad that moving them down just kind of forced them up one slot. That's the long and the short of it. They didn't play good. They're not good. I think they're a terrible team. But in the end, they have 4 wins, and they are just one game out of playoff contention at the moment. So they are better than a lot of these teams behind them, in that regard at least. Number 19 on the bye, moving up 5 slots. Probably only because they're on the bye, so I somewhat forgot how bad they've been playing for the most part, except for when they killed the Dolphins. The Baltimore Ravens. Again, like I said, they were on the bye. Nothing new to say about them. Flacco is not elite, not even that good right now. Defense is okay, but not that good. They got a little bit of a running game, but not a great one. So there's just nothing to really love about this team. They're 4-5. They have next to no shot at their division, but they do still have a shot at the wild card just because the bottom part of the AFC playoffs is just a little bit weak right now. All right, number 18, moving down 4 slots, the Washington Redskins. What have they lost, like 3 or 4 now, I think? They lost fairly badly. They were competitive for a little while, but still in the end lost, reasonably badly to a good Vikings team. So you can't fault them for losing to a good Vikings team. But now, again, they're under 500. NFC is a little bit stronger in that middle ground than the AFC. So pretty much, there's been a little bit of talk about the conferences in this way recently. How I break it down is the top of both conferences are fairly comparable. I would you have the Eagles and the Patriots and the Steelers, and then you have a couple other NFC teams, and the Chiefs are sort of in the mix there. And then after that, at the bottom, you have a couple of terrible teams on both sides. But you kind of in that middle ground, you don't have like the second tier. You have a big drop off from the first tier to the second tier of AFC teams. You don't have that in the NFC. You have a little bit of a drop off from those top teams to the next tier. So you actually have a lot of 5 and 4 teams that are out of the playoffs right now in the NFC. So a 4 and 5 team has very little chance of making it there, where a 4 or 5 team in the AFC is actually still really competitive. So that explains the Skins. Because they're in the NFC and 5 and 4 is just in a big group of teams that are not in the playoffs right now, they are gonna have a hard time making up much ground at this point. To that point, number 17, not moving, the Oakland Raiders. They were on their bye. They're also 4 and 5, but now they're only 1 game out of the playoffs. Though the team they're trailing is the Bills, and they lose the tiebreaker, so that makes it a little tougher. But still, they have been playing better of late. They have more talent than a lot of the teams that are behind them, so that's kind of why they're still at this point. Again, not much to say there. I fully expect them to lose to New England. If they win that game, then all of a sudden you've got to take them a little more seriously again. Number 16, moving up 2 slots legitimately, not just because other teams suck. The Green Bay Packers. Yes, it was the Bears, so it's not like super impressive, but they did shut them down. They did shut down a good Bears running game, and they were able to score even with Brett Hundley on a pretty good Bears defense. And now, all of a sudden, they're 5 and 4. They're not in the playoffs right now, but they are seriously in contention. They're still tied with the Lions for second in the division. Catching the Vikings might be tough, but finishing second is not unrealistic if they can keep playing similar to this as opposed to they had the past couple of weeks. We'll see what's real and what's not. Unlike, say, the Texans, they are not in 100% complete free fall after their injury issues, though, like I said, that can turn around pretty quick. I do not expect this team to be great, but they're just, at this point, they're not god-awful. Um, Number 15, moving down 2 slots. Currently, your number 6 seed in the AFC, the Buffalo Bills. This is still after losing 2 in a row and only being at 5-4. As I was saying, sort of the second tier AFC teams are pretty weak this year, and this is the full evidence of that. Bills have a tough schedule from here on out, so they could very easily fall out of the playoffs. They also apparently are benching Tyrod Taylor for Peterman. Tyrod is not like an amazing quarterback, but he's not bad. And he is certainly not the reason that they have been struggling. Now he was terrible last week. That's without question. But the week before when they lost, he was solid. Yes, a lot of that was garbage time numbers, but he still wasn't the main reason that they lost that game. And he has been one of the main reasons they've won some of their other games. So this is kind of a surprising move for a team that's still in playoff contention to go to a unheralded 5th round rookie over a former Pro Bowler who's been very good for them for several years now. So I think the Bills could be sabotaging themselves and could fall out of the playoffs and consequently also potentially fall quite a bit lower in these rankings too. Now, maybe Peterman will be the next great find and move them into stronger contention, but I wouldn't put any money on that at this point. Number 14, moving up 1 slot, the Detroit Lions. This is all about just their record and the fact that they are on the cusp of playoff contention. They beat, again, reasonably convincingly, but not completely destroyed the Browns. The Browns obviously are the worst team in the league, so not a lot of credit's going to go for that. We'll have to see how they do from here on out. They are definitely in the mix on the teams that are just out of the playoffs right now. Number 13, moving down 4 slots, the Dallas Cowboys. There's a couple of things for this. Well, one is, obviously, they are now 5-4, so that's they are out of the playoffs. They need to win a couple of games to get back into playoff contention. They have a fairly tough schedule coming up. They are now without Zeke. They also could be They could also be without Sean Lee for a couple of games, who's but definitely overall their best defender. Obviously, they have some other guys having some pretty good seasons, but that's a big loss. Lost the left tackle. I mean, geez, what was this? Ches Green, I think his name is, who replaced Smith. He could not get anything done. Now the Cowboys also didn't make up for it. They should have put a tight end on that side. They should have had a guy chipping. They should have done something, but they could not do anything with that downgraded tackle. That might even be the biggest loss of those 3 huge losses. Now I don't know if I haven't heard anything that's supposed to be a sustained long-term injury. So if he comes back, then that's not as big of a factor. But the Zeke thing is big, and the Sean Lee thing is big. On a team that's on the cusp, if those guys miss a couple of games and that causes them to lose a couple of games, they might have been able to win. They're going to be out of the playoffs, and they're going to fall even farther. Number 12, the team that beat the Cowboys, moving up 4 slots, the Atlanta Falcons. That win definitely got them back. That got them back in the playoff chase. If they had lost that game, they pretty much would have been out of it. Now they're in that sea of 5-4 teams that are just out of the playoffs but have a chance. And now that was a fairly big game because they now have the tiebreaker over the Cowboys if it does come down to that at the end. So that's a nice little bonus for them. This team still has a lot of potential. The defense has been solid overall this year, so it's disappointing that it's mostly the offense killing them. So if the offense can start clicking, and they were pretty good against the Cowboys, they could run off a few wins in a row and be right back in it. I still like this team, so I still think that they have a chance, but they do need to put a little bit of a winning streak together to have a good chance of making anything happen. Number 11, moving up 1 slot, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Said it before, said it again. I don't really believe in this team, but they won again, but they beat a crappy Chargers team that keeps finding ways to beat themselves. They should have lost that game, or they could have very easily lost the game. There's never a shoulda, woulda, coulda. There's never a shoulda. There's always a coulda. They could have very easily have lost that game, and that would have changed things a little, not that much, just because again, if you look at this San Diego game was one of the tougher games they have left on the schedule. So I think it would be pretty hard for them not to win at least 9 and probably 10 games. I still think the Titans will probably win the division, but with the weakness outside of the top 3 or 4 teams in the AFC, not just top 3 teams in the AFC, it's hard to see them not making the playoffs. They really would have to completely collapse. Also moving up one slot, the just aforementioned Tennessee Titans. They still they have the same record as the Jags and still currently hold the tiebreaker, so they would be the division winners. Hence, they're ahead. They barely beat a not very good Bengals team, so I'm not that impressed with them. Coming into the year, I had higher hopes for the Titans than the Jags. So again, that's without either super standing out. That's why I still have the Titans over the Jags. There's a lot of reasons you could have the Jags over them, so I'm not saying that this is definitive. You could flipping these two. There's really no strong argument to say that you couldn't go the other way with that. So, yeah, I mean, one of them's definitely winning the division and definitely going to the playoffs. The other one's almost definitely going to get a wild card spot and almost definitely the number 1 wild card spot. So that's why they're kind of in lockstep right now. Number 9, another team that I keep saying I don't really believe in, the Carolina Panthers. But again, at this point, they're in playoff. They're the number 1 wild card. They're only a half game out of. Really, they're only a half game out of like the number 2 seed. So, this team is getting it done. I do not think that they are going to be a strong contender in the end, but right now they are. Again, it would be hard to see them not winning. It would be amazing if they didn't win at least 9 games. They're probably going to win 10 games, and they're probably going to be the top wild card. Maybe not the top wild. They're definitely going to be. It seems unlikely that this gaggle of 5 and 4 teams will knock. 2 of them will be able to get in and knock them out at this point. Number 8, the other current NFC wildcard team, the Seattle Seahawks, at 6-3, so they're half a game behind the Panthers, and they are a full game behind the Rams in the division. I still think that they have a decent shot at winning the division, but it's in no way a sure thing. But I do think that they are better than most of the rest of the teams that we would be looking at to knock them out of the playoffs. So, yeah, so they might end up as a wild card, and they might end up as the 6th seed. But I think if they do that, they will be a fairly dangerous 6th seed. But couldn't move them up. Didn't really want to move them down. We'll have to see what happens. The Sherman injury obviously could be big, but as we've seen, good teams can make up for injuries to good players outside of quarterback for the most part. So we'll see what happens with this is a solid organization, so what happens there. Number 7, also staying put, this Kansas City Chiefs. Clear number 3 team in the AFC right now on the bye. Probably a little closer to the top than they are to number 4 at this point. They do seem to have been showing a few chinks in the armor the last couple weeks before the bye. Let's see if they were able to rectify those and finish strong. Like I said, right now it seems hard to see them not getting the 3rd seed, but at worst 4th. Bye seems a little bit unlikely at this point, but again, it depends if they finish strong enough, and if mostly the Patriots falter, because it'd be hard to see with the Steelers owning the tiebreaker. It seems unlikely that they would be able to finish a full game ahead of the Steelers at this point, but anything could happen. I just don't think it will. Number 6, moving down one slot, the Minnesota Vikings. This is, they won their game. It wasn't super impressive, and the 2 teams right behind them in the division both won, so not that there's a lot of pressure on them, but it definitely kept hope alive for both the Lions and the Packers. I don't think either of them will catch them, but it, like I said, kept things alive for at least one more week. So moving up one slot to number 5, the New Orleans Saints. So the thing with the Vikings is inherently what they did last week, I would not move them down, but it opened the door for the Saints, who kill the Bills. The Bills are an okay team. They've had a good defense. They were at home. The Saints generally do not play well in outdoor cold or weather games. Now, it wasn't terrible weather or anything like that, for sure. But they're not as good on the road. They're not as good outside. But they didn't just win. They absolutely embarrassed and dominated the Bills. So given that the Vikings were kind of meh, I basically just flip-flopped these two. I even over the last couple of weeks, I was kind of like, do I want the Vikings or the Saints? Vikings or Saints? I had it in the other order, but not super confident. And I'm not saying I'm super confident in this either, but like I said, the recency bias. The Saints were awesome last week. The Vikings were only okay. So again, at this point, there's very small margins between these two teams and even the next two in front of them. Speaking of the one in front of them, number 4, the Pittsburgh Steelers moving down one slot. Again, they won, but they barely beat the Colts. They have a tendency to playing down to their competition. That is certainly the case this week. I thought they were going to get over that, but clearly not. That doesn't mean they're not going to come back and win their next several games and, could even beat the Patriots in a couple of weeks. But you do have to worry about this team just not being able to get up for every game. Like, this should have been a game that they won by 30 freaking points, and they won by 3 because they were pretty lucky. Still think they're the second best team in the AFC, and I think they're probably closer to the Patriots than they are to the Chiefs. But like I said, if they have more performances like this week, then that perception could easily change. Number 3, moving up one slot, the LA Rams. Again, Steelers won, but they were unimpressive opening the door here. The Rams, the last couple of weeks they've played bad teams. But they've been killing these bad teams, so it's not like they're edging them. They they played the Texans. Texans without Watson and Watt and Merciless and all of them are not a good team anymore. But they put up over 30 on them, and they beat them by 3 scores. So, it wasn't like they were playing them close, and obviously they absolutely annihilated the Giants the week before. The Giants suck, but it's not like they beat a sucky team by a touchdown. They beat a sucky team by I don't even remember what, but by 6 touchdowns. They're still an NFL. These are still NFL teams with real NFL talent players. So the fact that they're just absolutely killing them in this way, is impressive. They're making the playoffs. I don't see any way they can't make the playoffs at this point. They have a good shot at the division. They're currently up 1 game on the Seahawks. Seahawks do own the tiebreaker, so we'll see how that happens. And we're gonna really see where the Rams are these next 5 weeks mostly. So this coming week they are at Minnesota, and then the next week they have New Orleans at home. Then they're playing Arizona the week after that, but it is a division game on the road, so it's not a gimme, but they should win that one. That's their closest thing to a reprieve. Then they have Philly at home, and then they travel to Seattle for that game. And then even after that, they're going to be playing in Tennessee, so that's 6 weeks out. So they have a pretty tough schedule coming up. If they can come out of those 6 games with 4 wins, that they're a really legit team. Then they finish with San Francisco at home, so if that game has any meaning, they should win that one pretty easy. But otherwise, they don't. They have a pretty tough schedule. Because the only real light game they have is Arizona on the road, so that's not a complete slam dunk. But those other, especially the 4 teams against the top NFC teams, are big. The Titans on the road's not as big, but that's certainly not an easy game either. Next, we have put at number 2, the New England Patriots. Big win over the Broncos. Big win as in was a big margin of victory. The Broncos definitely have fallen off, so the fact that they beat a a 3-win team was not in and of itself impressive, but they won impressively. Playing in Denver has been one of the few things that Brady and Belichick have had trouble with over the past 2 decades, so that's always nice to see. Good all-around game. The offense was good. The defense really shut down a not very good, granted, Broncos offense, but they did completely shut them down. And as we mentioned during the Broncos blurb, I mean, they absolutely destroyed them in every aspect of special teams. So, all those concerns at the beginning of the season with the Patriots, seems like everything is clicking right now, and obviously, it's actually still a little early before you want everything to be perfect compared to if you can do it later in the season, but this is when you want to start sorting things out, and having trouble weeks 1, 2, 3, whatever, are less of a big deal. And as usual, the Patriots are showing that they are the class of the AFC. Between their recent good performance and the near collapse of the Bills and the Dolphins recently, what looked like a potentially competitive division just 2-3 weeks ago now looks like a pretty easy cakewalk for the Pats the rest of the way. Now, they do play both of those teams all 4 of the games still, so there is a potential for those teams to step up and show that they deserve to win those games. Or the Patriots could absolutely kill them in those games and make it look like a total joke. But there is, they do have the potential of making some noise, but it's unlikely. So Pat Stain put it number 2 because even though they're on the bye, you still have the best record in the league and very impressive overall team in the number 1 Philadelphia Eagles. I said they didn't play last week, so there's not too much to say about them. They have one of the top teams in the league in pretty much all aspects. As long as they still have the best record, it's hard to not have them as the best team in these rankings. Even though I think they could lose to the Patriots. I actually just recently did my mid-season Super Bowl updated picks, and I had the Patriots beating the Eagles. Now, obviously, I'm a little bit of a homer, but I do honestly think that the Pats are very capable of beating the Eagles. Now, I said I had it as a very close game, so it could go either way. I do think these are the 2 top teams in the league overall right now. But the Eagles have a better record, so that's where they're sticking with until there's a good reason to move them down. They almost certainly have the division wrapped up. They have 2 games against Dallas still, so pretty much the only chance Dallas has, and Dallas is the only team that has a chance because they already swept the Redskins. So the amount of games the Redskins would have to win with Philly playing incredibly poorly from here on out is almost impossible. If Dallas could sweep the 2 games against the Eagles, they only need a little help. In the rest of their games, they only have to win 1 more than the Eagles do, if they can sweep the Eagles. So that's pretty unrealistic, especially with what's going on with the Cowboys right now. So they pretty much have their division locked up and have the inside track on the number 1 seed. All right, so that's this week's Power Rankings. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment, and share the videos, and subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on other social media. Facebook and Twitter are both @MA Sports Central. Thanks, and we will see you soon.